Hello everybody and welcome. I am playing Generic Fantasy Game 3. This is a build that is still in production. This is sort of an alpha build, sort of a stress test type of thing. This is a sequel to Generic Fantasy Game 1 and Generic Fantasy Game 2, and I sort of just want to play it and talk about the differences. So you don't really get to build a character in this sort of test environment, so instead we're just going to go with a default knight, although this Herald of White is particularly strong. The mace has a very special buff effect that can do a lot of good if you're having trouble playing a game like this, but let's get started. So we are going to play as a knight in Generic Fantasy Game 3. This is Generic Fantasy Game 3. I don't know what this is on the screen. That's some Japanese characters I don't recognize. I see the kanji for dragon in there, so you know it's a fantasy game. So here we are. This is Generic Fantasy Game 3. You can see this thing right here at the start. Kind of looks a little bit like a relic from Generic Fantasy Game 1 called the Lord Vessel. I don't really think that it is that item, but hey, you never know. So in Generic Fantasy Game 3, there are some changes. You have your Estus Flask, you have your Ash Estus, and your embers, which are actually your humanities or human effigies. Your Estus works the way that you would think. Your Ash Estus, that will heal your magic. So if I go into this, if I press R2, I go into what is called a weapon art stance, and you'll see that after I've used it, that little blue bar is, been depleted a little bit. So I can use my Ash Estus to fill that up. I also have different shields. So that shield with the sword at the bottom is a weapon arts shield, and this one is a parrying shield, which might be familiar if you've played Generic Fantasy Game 1 or Generic Fantasy Game 2. So a lot of the things here are what you would expect, although the health bar, the addition of the mana bar, and things like that are definitely things that you might expect from the game that came before Generic Fantasy Game 1, which was Classic Fantasy Game. Very, very interesting game, that game. So we can walk around. The items are what you would expect: throwing knives, fire bombs, things like that. And we can light these cool bonfires, and it sends a little message in Generic Fantasy Game. There's some graphical things that are a little funny, but I'm not too worried about it. I've played this one night. I skipped the other night because I was very tired, and you're probably not interested in hearing me fuck about anymore, so let's get right into combat. I know that there's a bad fellow here, although I keep hitting my sword against the wall, which is not good, so I have an arrow right inside of me. And just for shits and giggles, I can leave a message on the ground. So let's say, be wary of sniper. And I'll put that down on the ground, and people who are playing the game can read that. Isn't that swell? So that system, you might remember from Generic Fantasy Game 1 and 2, is still in place, as are these bloodstains that will show me how people have died. Somebody has died rather quickly. I don't know exactly what they were fighting, but I can't imagine it was all that good. So here we go, we're going to start playing. And I don't know the area quite as well as I would like, but it's not too bad. Combat is faster. You might hear me pressing my controller's buttons a little bit more pronouncedly than you might expect from a game like this, which is usually a little bit more methodical, but the combat is sort of like Victorian fantasy game, which came out this year, and I thought was quite good, which was also made by the same developer. So it's taken some things from that and added them into this game. So let's head over here and take care of the sniper, and let's switch to our parry shield and get a parry. Oh, maybe I can't with his big axe, so I'm actually going to roll away. And you might notice that my rolls are fairly quick. I don't know if that's just the nature of how things are in this test environment, but poise and similar stats like adaptability don't seem to be as punishing, so I'm in heavy armor and I can roll around fairly quickly. On the subject of rolling, for those of you who might be curious, you'll see me do backstabs later on. The window for backstabs is looser, so it's a little bit more similar to what you had in Generic Fantasy 1 as opposed to Generic Fantasy Game 2, which had a tighter window for these things. But I'm going to backstab here, and it's not as much trouble as it was in Generic Fantasy Game 2. Pretty decent, and as far as I can tell in PvP combat, there is no backstabs on rolls anymore, no rolling backstabs, which is kind of nice. I can't open that gate. I'm not as familiar with the level design here as I would like. So, one thing that people enjoy about Generic Fantasy Game 1 and Generic Fantasy Game 2 is the difficulty, and I think that sort of remains here, although the faster combat might actually make it not as difficult. At least I don't think it's as difficult. And that will sort of be put to the test later on as I encounter some tricky enemies. Here you can see the remains of a dragon, which is interesting. Dragons often show up in these games, particularly the early levels of these games. So my attempts at parrying were terrible right there. But you can see the parries are still pretty great. But if I block using a parrying shield, I will actually take damage, which is something I don't want. These enemies here scream and alert the other enemies in the area, which is not all that fun, although there's not that many enemies in this area right now. I'm actually going to heal, which was a little ill-advised there, but that's not a problem. Healing is a little closer to Generic Fantasy Game 1, where the healing is instant instead of gradual like it was in Generic Fantasy Game 2, although you still get rooted to the spot. So that's something that hasn't changed from game to game. Enemy placement in this level is fairly strong. I enjoy it, even though this part of Generic Fantasy Game 3 that they are letting us play reminds me a little bit too much of some of the previous level designs. This reminds me of the Undead Burg, and it also reminds me a little bit of Boletaria, and that's not great. And I understand that Generic Fantasy as a series tends to be about cycles and familiarity and sort of how things go. Here you can see something about the Lord of Cinder, which might be a callback to a character in Generic Fantasy Game 1. Gwyn, specifically, although it's not as clear. And we just picked up a greatsword, so I can switch that to that. As always, I can two-hand these weapons, and I can do some blocking attacks. I don't like using the greatsword too much, just because of the speed differential. It hits strongly, but I'm not a great fan of the slowness of the swings. Not that this is anything different than what we've encountered before in Generic Fantasy Game as a series. In fact, in Generic Fantasy Game 2, I enjoyed playing with the Ultra Greatsword weapon sets quite a bit. But here, well, it's a faster form of gameplay. Something about the way that The way that the giant greatswords are used don't really work for me yet. Here you can see the return of the dragons. It sort of reminds you of the Hellkite Drake from the bridge in Generic Fantasy Game 1. And the only thing I really encourage for using the greatsword in is large groups. Although, I think I'm just going to get hit by some fire. So, that group sort of distracted me, but the death mechanic in this game is what you would expect from Generic Fantasy Game 3 or 2 or 1, although it seems like, because this is a stress test of the network, that this has frozen, so we're actually going to take a break right here, and I'll load up. We'll still play as the knight, and I'll sort of have to start from the beginning, but that's the price you pay when you're playing a game where the connection, or when you're testing out the connection. So I will be right back. Okay, and so I'm back to generally where I was when the game sort of seized up on me. I grabbed the greatsword, and here we are again. I'll be careful about that dragon, and we'll move forward. Getting to this point took like 2 minutes. I was taking it slow at the beginning of the video to sort of discuss differences from Generic Fantasy Game 1 and 2 to this title, but I think a lot of what's going on here is pretty illustrative in and of itself. So we'll just sort of move forward and draw these enemies out and do our best to move forward. I've actually, because I've had such little time to really play this game, in the form that I would like, anyway. I hope I will get to reach the boss, and we'll get to see how that is. There are probably other people on YouTube that you can see that from, other people who've gotten that far. I haven't had as much time with the game. I wasn't able to play it last night, only played so far the first night, so we'll move forward and see where that gets us. The backstab window, again, very loose. I don't have a problem with that, and we'll try and join a player's session, probably as a white phantom. We'll put down our soap sign and get summoned, because that's sort of what this test is mostly about. You know, you want it to be sort of a demo for everything, but it's really about testing how many players you can have. These knights have a wide swing, which makes it easy to get the backstab again. Nothing wrong with that. You can sort of chain backstabs, which is something that some people might object to, but this early in the game, I feel like that's a fairly viable strategy, and since we're dealing with mostly humanoid enemies, that'll change as you head into the later game. And it changes within the demo itself. You get some larger enemies, some enemies that transform, and it's not as clear sort of what their weaknesses are. There's a rather large enemy in a courtyard later on that I've actually had a little bit of difficulty with in the runs I've done of this game. Or at least the ones that I've gotten far enough in without, you know, it sort of crashing on me like it did before. And that's just because these enemies are tougher and a little trickier to deal with, but that's not that big of a problem. We'll light another bonfire and move forward. So, among friends of mine, critic friends, and, you know, casual friends who play these sorts of games, there can be some disdain for this series, and I think that's sort of earned, in the sense that this game series sort of purports to be, and you can see that how wide that backstab radius really is right there, purports to really be about sometimes player expression in terms of their character builds, but it's also a game that deliberately, and we'll try rolling like the note says, it deliberately sort of obfuscates its mechanics, so there's a lot of numbers involved in these games, and it's not always clear what those numbers produce, which can be a real pain. Here we can get our hands on the Legion scimitars, which are a very interesting weapon, actually. So our weapon art stance will do a spin with the scimitars, so we can actually try that out right here. It hits okay, but it's nothing to write home about compared to some of the other weapons. And again, we'll go in for those backstabs whenever we can. Scimitar has a nice sweeping reach. It might remind you of the weapon you got as a swordsman at the start of Generic Fantasy Game 2. You had 2 scimitars there. In this case, the 2 scimitars are actually one weapon, but you sort of use them as one item as opposed to sort of 2 weapons, and one taking up your left-hand slot and one taking up your right-hand slot. Here's something a little different. This enemy is going to transform into something a little bit more abstract. That reminds me, honestly, of generic fantasy, not fantasy game, rather, generic Victorian fantasy, which is good. I like the idea of enemies that transform and are sort of a bit different. Although I'm sort of cheesing it right now by using the fire bombs, which I don't have a big problem with. It's more or less just a byproduct of me trying to move through this area safely. And, I mean, they give you the fire bombs, and so I have no real problem using them. Menus are fairly easy to navigate right now, although I don't have access to my inventory or status or equipment screens, which is a bit of a bummer. I do have access to my soap sign and my red eye orb that will allow me to invade other players. Maybe we'll do an invasion later on. Right now it tends to be a little bit of a gang squad situation because I don't know if this is absolute fact, but you seem to only really invade people if they have other white phantoms with them. Like I said, that's sort of the game sort of wanting to test out the stress test of how many players it can really deal with, but it can be a little bit of a pain when you want to maybe do a one-on-one, and instead you have to deal with a bit of a crappier situation. There's that wide, loose backstab situation again. We'll try a weapon arts follow-up there, which does a decent amount of damage. Let's move away from its combo and do a little bit of healing. That was a bad, misplaced parry. So I'm actually going to use my Estus Flask. But this enemy's actually smart enough. You might have noticed it. I'm going to fall to my death. You might have noticed it. That was a very embarrassing death. When I was using my Estus Flask, the enemy actually ran in to interrupt me. So the AI in this game, in Generic Fantasy Game 3, is rather good. At least these enemies right now show promise in the sense that their tactics are a little bit more diversified from what we had in earlier titles, where, I mean, you can still definitely bait enemies like I did just right there, but at the same time, they also know how to take advantage of player actions as well. So if I am, really using my Estus a lot, then the enemy sort of knows that and can compensate and rush in and attack me. The generic hollow enemies here won't do that, but, that's how it is. You have your jump back attacks, so here I can do a jumping stab, and this one here is just a sort of rush forward after you do the backwards jump. So what we are actually going to do here, because I don't want to really deal with a retread of that transforming enemy, is I'm actually just going to run right past it. These games have always been lenient to sort of speedrunning strats, running past enemies, and here you can see retrieval is just like you would expect. I mean, there are definitely certain techniques that are unique to each game regarding what you can and cannot do in spaces, different sort of strategies for different spaces, but you can probably hear me mashing on the controller. But in general, you're able to run past enemies. If you know where you're going in the space, then you're absolutely fine. So I think that's the knight from before, so we're in a little bit of a tighter space, but we should be okay. There's some hanging enemies that sort of got the better of me there. That wide sweeping attack from the knight is messing with me. I'm caught in a corner, which is not great. So I'm not particularly proud of the amount of times I'm dying, but this is just sort of a casual video. I'm not claiming to be the best generic fantasy game 3 player. And you're probably sick of me saying that term, but I think it's funny to keep on calling it that. And the level is small enough that it's not that big of an issue. And in fact, just because I can, let's put down my soap sign right here, and we'll probably get called on fairly quickly. And if we're lucky, we can help them fight off an invasion. We can do all sorts of stuff. We'll probably see some of the other classes as well. I didn't want to switch classes just because what we sort of know as the general sword and board characters is a build that I think a lot of people play as. So I wanted to see it sort of show it off here. And here we are. We are going to join another player and hopefully protect them and do a decent job. Maybe we'll run into some PvP. If that's the case, it's going to be a 2-on-1 situation, which will be interesting. They are praising the sun, which I can actually do myself. I hit the wrong button. It's actually the center pad, and if you hit it on the left, you do your emotes. And the nice thing is, if you're wondering, you can cancel out of emotes using a roll or a dodge, which I don't think you could do in every title, particularly generic fantasy game 1. Here we are. Another player has showed up. I'm actually going to switch to my greatsword. Alright, so they are trying to parry me. But I can switch to other weapons. And so now it's a 2-on-1 situation, which is why I'm saying that for invaders, it's a rough situation right now. But on that parry, I wanted to try and punish that parry with a backstab, but it's not completely working out the way I would like. This is not the best bit of PvP I've participated in. They want to run towards this enemy, which I can just sort of change using the fire bombs again. And they want to mess with me by using that monster against me. But we'll have my my partner sort of deal with that. Alright, so feeling good there. I wanted to punish, but I didn't. But so we had our teammates sort of take care of that. So not bad. Dark Spirit destroyed. I'm going to heal. That was really messy PvP. That was a bad showing on my part. Hopefully, if they're still around, they can see me give them a little respectful bow. We are probably going to get invaded again, which is a bit of a pain. But I understand why they're doing it this way right now. Let's follow the teammate, and they're going to pick up some items. Probably kill that hollow. Actually, I'll do it for them, even though they're generally harmless. So it was 3 knights participating in battle, which was a little boring. It would have been nice maybe to see something else, but, you know, it is what it is. They're going to take care of some of the enemies down there. I'm actually going to run ahead rather foolishly and try and clear out some of the enemies for my teammate. And we'll see what we can do over here. That's just a bowman. And I'm going to fall to my death again. Or not. but I am going to run in to some dangerous enemies down here. I thought I was going to fall into a pit. I'm being rather reckless right now, which is sort of a byproduct of me narrating as I play. You can see there's a very large enemy here, and I'm going to sort of use my Estus flask and see what I can do. The two of us going up against it will make things a little easier. I'm going to use some pine resin to sort of do what I can to help out. I'm going to draw its focus. It hits very hard indeed. But I can stagger it, which is very nice. And if I want to, I can attack at range with some throwing knives to sort of do damage. My teammate can attack from behind, or I can go in and get the kill as well. So with the two of us, it's not that bad. By yourself, that enemy can be tricky because of its long reach. But it's a nice change from the more generic fantasy designs of the Hollows and the Knights. It reminds me of the Executioner in generic Victorian game that came out recently that you can fight in the first section of the game in Yharnam. So we're definitely not going to get brilliant enemy design in this playthrough unless we reach the boss, which I like the design of. Although the way they fight is sort of evocative of the Vicar Amelia fight in generic Victorian game, to the best of my understanding, from what I've seen of the fight. I actually haven't had the fortune of participating in the fight myself. I sort of want to move forward and see what I can do. They're just sort of destroying everything they can. I'm assuming that the summon time limit is rather high. I believe in Generic Fantasy 2 it was upwards of 40 minutes. It's not anything that I've seen tested in these playthroughs, but, you know, maybe we'll hit that point. We'll hit that threshold. I hope not. I sort of would like to progress in my own world, but helping somebody else is still perfectly acceptable in my book. If you're curious, I was always a sun bro slash sun gal in previous games. I like cooperative play. Although I would still do... I still had a character specifically for fighting in the arenas. I had a Red Phantom character. I didn't do a lot of invasions, but I still did fight in the arenas, which I enjoyed quite a bit. The enemies are pretty easy. The levels circle in around on themselves in a way that's very much like the way that levels were designed in Generic Fantasy Game 1 as opposed to Generic Fantasy Game 2. In Generic Fantasy Game 2, and I know you're probably sick of me saying Generic Fantasy, but again, it's fun. In that game, the spaces were a little nonsensical. I'm assuming that this is a connection issue. So we might have just run out of luck, but I'm going to move downwards into this space anyway. Or upwards! Oh, I thought the elevator was going to take me somewhere else. I haven't fully explored this space the way that I probably should. I can't really open the gate, though, which is a bummer, so the question becomes, yep, either an error was going to occur, or I think I can probably use... maybe there's a separation crystal thing there. Maybe there isn't. So that was interesting. Cooperative play. I enjoy it. And it dumps me back into my world with full Estus and health, which is sort of a nice benefit. Insofar as everything else, I'm going to try and progress to the point that we were at, but I'm definitely going to try and move past that large enemy without really giving it the time of day. I don't really want to deal with it on my own. Not because I consider myself a bad Generic Fantasy series player, but more because I don't want to really put up with the larger enemies right now, outside of the boss once we get to that space. The game right now is sort of fond of tossing a lot of enemies at you that can sort of swarm you. The large enemies are a nice change of pace from this, but for a sort of tutorial area, having swarms of enemies that are weak, it sort of teaches you to dodge properly and do all sorts of things. Although if I'm moving the right way, I might be able to head and fight a rather interesting enemy down this way. Again, we can take advantage of that wide backstab. So if I head down here, I'm fairly certain there is an enemy, or maybe I'm heading the wrong way. I know that there is a dangerous enemy if you descend a location. It might be a location that you need a key for, which is a bit of a bummer. I certainly can't open this space from here, but I can see where I died last. So we'll sort of head that way. Basically right now I'm just narrating what's going on in my mind. I wish I had a little bit more insight into what I think makes these games work so well. I think this door requires a key, or maybe that's even the door to the elevator that we were at before. It's a little unclear to me, to be honest. I just sort of want to explore these depths again, see if there are any items that I'm missing, but I don't think there are. So we'll head out of here. Yeah, definitely right now there's not a lot of encumbrance for equipment. Equipment load doesn't seem to be a thing. I cannot tell if that's just a decision for the game, or if that is something that is just a decision for this this test. So let's take care of this enemy here. Oh, I didn't hit them the way that I wanted. I'm also still sort of in the mindset of generic Victorian game, which had the regain system where you could attack enemies after they attacked you and get a little bit of health back. After playing that game for so long, it's sort of hard to get out of that mindset. Luckily though, we can still skip past those annoying little enemies. We'll head the way that we did before, and we'll be careful of those hanging enemies and sort of take it bit by bit. I'll heal here, and I want to draw that enemy out if possible, or take it out rather quickly. That was nice, dropping that enemy off the ledge. I appreciate that. And we can sort of move down the way that we were going before. Oh, I can't tell if you can only attack upwards. This enemy barely has any health, so I'm sort of amazed that it survived. Not quite an emergent event, but definitely a surprise. That's me falling again, but I know I can survive that fall. I should have played it a little safer. I'm still being fairly reckless in my playstyle, which is silly of me. I'm not being as attentive as I could be. So let's run through here, because I'm not interested in fighting that larger enemy. I don't know how large of an aggro range it has, so we'll sort of just move past it and head near where we were before. We'll check out this higher area. So, a large enemy again. Maybe I can kick it over the edge. Alright. Getting hit a little harder than I would like. Hard hits are something that this series is sort of known for. Enemies taking a good chunk off of your health. So yeah, this is sort of where we were when we encountered that network disconnection. And I know that there was another sort of swelling of enemies. We'll take out some of them with a firebomb. And that's okay. They give you a lot of items here, so they sort of really want you to use them. Let's head upwards and follow this elevator, and maybe we can open up a shortcut, which would be really, really nice. Again, the levels sort of taking hints from generic fantasy game 1 and turning inwards on themselves in a way that is significant and useful. Pick up an item, firebomb, nice backstab, and we'll sort of keep going. We'll edit everything together because it won't make much of a difference. The game is running at 30 FPS. And, yep, we opened up a nice shortcut. And so what I want to do is actually save at the bonfire that I know is up here. So we'll run past everything. We'll run past that annoying sniper. And we opened up a nice shortcut, which is something you could do in generic Victorian game as well. Not as many shortcut options in generic fantasy game 2. That's what I was sort of alluding to before, but we can move past the enemies and... Oh, well, I wasn't expecting to get hit so immediately. And I'm actually just going to use an S discharge here. Even though it didn't really take off all that much health. But it's nice to sort of have this shortcut to take us back to where we wanted to go. Oh, I forgot there's that big group of enemies. So I actually could switch to the greatsword, which might be the smarter decision here. So weapons can still be situational and useful, but I sort of want to stay with the longsword if possible. Let's follow this route. So we went down, and let's press forward. I don't like that big fellow off to our left, and instead I just want to press forward here. So we have a knight, 2 knight characters, as a matter of fact, a couple of patrolling ones. So really what I want to do is damage them one at a time. And I didn't mean to use the pine resin, I meant to use the firebomb, but the pine resin is still fairly useful. The firebomb is useful as well. The large shield, not exactly what I would have preferred going up against, but yeah. So see, that one's going to charge me because I'm using my Estus. They're hitting rather hard, and I want to sort of get away from them. Although heading into this tight corridor might be a mistake, but if they follow me up here, I'm going to have some room, so I have no problem with that. I, again, don't really know their aggro ranges, so we're going to press on downwards and hopefully not get completely embarrassed. Oh well, I just got staggered. So watching your stamina is still fairly important. So those knights are actually fairly tough enemies, at least for me. Hopefully there will be a bonfire after these encounters, so I don't have to deal with this area too much. I'm not great with all of this. Although this might be where we encounter the boss, and if that is the case, then that's great. Although I sort of fear that there's another knight sneaking up on me, but that might not be true. So this large door, beating to a pulp required ahead, so this might be where the boss is. I did not mean to switch to the scimitars, and I only have so much of my flask, but that's okay. So here we go. I might encounter the boss here. Soul of a Proud Knight. And yeah, here's the boss. So we have that shortcut. It's easy to get down here. I can run past the enemies now. So this will be interesting. Some people have told me it took them only 1 or 2 tries. I don't know the enemy's movement set or anything, so that'll be difficult. My Estus charge not quite as high as I would like. And here we go. The reason I say this reminds me of the Vicar Amelia fight is probably the setting more than anything else, but it's also sort of this vaguely female, large monster character. Hopefully it doesn't make as much sound as Vicar Amelia, but you can see it has the veil and everything. So we're going to see what we can do here. Probably not too much. Alright, a stab, a sweeping attack, 2 sweeping attacks. Oh, that sweeping attack is rather damaging to stamina. So let's use some of that pine resin to see if we can do a little extra damage. Alright, not bad so far. That's not to say that this boss won't put up a fight, but it's hard for me to know what it's going to do. That definitely seemed like it was going to be an area of that attack. But because of the sweeping, you can get rather close behind it. Although I wasn't expecting it to sort of cast those, that circle on the ground. That was sort of much more damaging than I was expecting. I know this boss has multiple phases, from my understanding. So there it is, it pulls out a second sword, and I know it does a rather dangerous sweeping attack, like that right there. So I'm actually going to burn 2 Estus. I'm trying to do what I can. So I don't know if I'll win this fight. So there's that, probably another sweep attack coming, or it has a rather large jump attack. Oh, I did not realize that I was burning my last 2. But I can still use embers to recover after death. So I'm back to full health. I don't think it will last. I'm probably going to make some sort of mistake here. If only because the sweeping nature of those attacks is definitely a pain. Although the fire bombs are definitely going to help. Again, sort of cheesing the boss a little bit in ways that some people would say are a little unfair, but I'm actually pretty certain I'm not going to survive this encounter anyway. We're putting up a decent first fight, but here I'm running out of stamina, and I want to try and use the pine resin to do a little bit more damage. Although there's that sweep attack, which is probably going to get me up, so there we go. So I got it down pretty far, which isn't too bad. Sweep attack is a little bit of a problem, but, you know, I can sort of deal with that. The trick still seems to be sort of getting underneath towards their left-hand side, me circling around to my right, and moving on from there. I'm actually not seeing a lot of other players' soap signs, which is a little disheartening. I sort of would like to have a little bit of help for that fight, maybe, just to get through the content. Although this shortcut might not be all set up now, so I might, yep, I'm gonna have to go the long way. Although, hey, that enemy just fell, so that's great. A shortcut like this should have a switch, but it doesn't. It does the old step on the switch hullabaloo, so it's only useful so much. Out of curiosity, I will place my soapstone here, my summoning sign, and we'll see if maybe somebody summons me on the shortcut down to the boss. So, the boss itself doesn't seem too difficult, it just mostly seems a matter of just sort of getting into their weak spots and dealing with that. I'm being summoned. Not too bad, I can sort of sneak through this content, although I'll be summoned to the other player's world in a moment, and we'll go from there. But it is easier to sort of run past this content, although this larger swarm of enemies up here is going to be an issue. Or not as much an issue as I thought, so I'm not too peeved by that. This knight might get a hit on me. Oh, dang! That enemy got a hit on me instead. So that's a bit annoying. I'm getting summoned, and I'm okay with that. So we'll see where we end up, and maybe we'll get to take on that boss with another character, and I would sort of prefer that. Alright, I would rather us take that shortcut, but they seem to want to go up the long way. That's fine, I suppose, but possibly a little reckless on their behalf. There's a fair amount of enemies here, and I can't protect them. Alright, so we're getting invaded, though, which will lead to a nice, fun situation again. I'm going to switch to the greatsword. And let's presume the invader loaded in here. They did not, but let's presume it. Sort of making an ass out of you and me here, but I can deal with that. But they got a parry there, which is wonderful. I see the invading spirit, I think, or that might be the flicker of a flag. That's the flicker of a flag. I saw red and got excited. Thought I had encountered the phantom. But in these blind spots, you want to be careful. Maybe I'll do the boss one more time, or we'll sort of end it after this fight with the phantom. I don't want this video to be too long. I hear combat. Okay, there we go. The sound of combat worried me for a moment. If I two-hand the weapon, it might make the invading spirit focus on me, and I'm okay with that. Or maybe they weren't able to summon the red phantom, but this fella seems to want to summon another player as well, and that's okay. No, there's the phantom. Let's distract them if we can. Messing around with that greatsword. A little hit here. Alright, so this is a little bit of a gangspank. Punishing them for using that Estus, certainly. And there we go. Oh, look at that! They're hanging on by a thread. So there we go, that's going to get them. Not the most exciting bit of PvP, but let's give them a respectful battle nonetheless. And that restores our Estus, which is rather nice. So let's move forward if we can. So I sort of like the greatsword. Oh, I didn't mean to hit that. Summoning another phantom. So we're going to see how many phantoms we can really summon. So actually for this, let's try using the scimitars. Or rather the scimitar. Which, you know what, I just started using that right there, and fuck it, I don't like that. So we summoned another Wandering Knight. Popular class. I like it. I have no problem with it. Let's move forward and see what we can do. So I want to take care of this fellow. Oh, got hit a little bit. That's okay. The greatsword seems okay for PvP, at least in a group context. I want to sort of protect our... Oh, but if you're doing that, you're going to get one of our teammates killed. That's a problem. I think he wants to take on the dragon. But it doesn't seem like we're able to really do that, so let's rush forward. Although, that's just going to attract the dragon's fire. Take it again. And if we get the chance, we can just run through the flames again once they're picked up. I'm sort of unsure what our host is trying to accomplish. Because he ran right up there. And that fire spread is pretty powerful. And they definitely want to take out the dragon. Although, I can't see where they are. Okay, perhaps I can aim a throwing knife at the dragon. Nope, and I can't see where my teammate went. So let's presume they moved forward. A little bit of debris hanging in the air. So yeah, I think they moved forward. That was sort of hard to gauge. I thought they wanted to fight the dragon, which... that's fine. So maybe after all of this summoning fun, I might consider ending the video. I'm not really offering that much thought or conjecture at this point. I'm not a lore person. I'm not somebody who's going to really get into a lot of the mechanics of these games. But we are summoning a lot of phantoms. So 4 right now. And presuming it's similar to generic fantasy game 2 Scholar of the First Sin, that number can go up even higher. And we can also take into account what it means for invaders as well. With this many... oh, jeez, really? You hit me? Of all the people? With this many people sort of engaging in the combat, if we reach the boss, we're going to do pretty well, unless our host gets superbly overconfident. Oh, that's a little interesting, isn't it? Is our host going to move, or did we lose connection with them? We might have lost connection. There we go. Although our teammate might now be stuck in the air. Try and beckon him down with our torches. This is so stupid. I'm gonna leave them and head down at the very least and sort of see if I can't clear out some of the enemies. Oh no! Oh no! Oh, bad guys. So I guess that phantom decided to go home, which is fine. I'm not entirely sure what happened there. They sort of ended up on the railing, which made them go on top of the head of the host, and they got stuck there. If the host is still up here, there seems to be some connectivity issues. Or not. They are right there. And there's our good buddy, Academy Assassin. 2 Wandering Knights, an Academy Assassin, an enemy trapped inside of a fountain. Definitely a test environment. Aha. I don't know what this thing is with the torches, but I'm a big fan of it. It's one of the stupidest things I've done in a game, but that's okay. Stupid can be good. Alright, so let's move towards the boss. Deal with these knights. We only have to deal with the 2, but they can be particularly dangerous. Okay. There's 1, there's 2. Not bad. And I'll heal up as well. Not the most dramatic way to deal with the boss. Maybe a one-on-one fight would have been better, but I have no problem doing it with the 3 of us. That should be more than sufficient. I don't think I have any more fire bombs, unfortunately, so we'll just keep the Estus flask all set up. The message is getting in the way of my helping my teammate. Oh, wow. So we'll actually use the greatsword to give me a little bit of reach to help in this boss fight. Although, I just sort of flubbed both of those attacks, which is a little disappointing. So, the Academy Assassin is using some mage techniques. I'm going to try and get in here with... Oh, I knew that was going to hit me. Oh, they almost grabbed me. I know that's a pretty devastating attack. I'm probably using that Estus a little too excitedly. In fact, let's switch back to the longsword because I'm burning through stamina, and I'm not a particular fan of that scenario. Alright, so there's that. I only have room for 1 more Estus. They're going to pull out their sword. Sort of sweep around. Oh, look at that. They can engulf the pillars in flames. Alright, my reach there was a little... Oh! Parry, or stun locked, rather. Alright, that's no good. I'm pretty sure that those attacks can give us frostbite, which I think acts as sort of a variant of toxin. I can't really speak entirely on that matter, but I think it's sort of similar. So actually, after we defeat this boss, I'm more than comfortable sort of calling it a day. Use some of these throwing knives, although they're behind the pillar, so... Oh Boy, that was kind of close with the spin attack. Oh, uh-oh. That might hit our teammate. Okay, he's using his Estus, which is what we want. Oh, sweep attack hitting me, even though I was behind them. So their attacks are getting a little bit more unpredictable. We're focusing on host, which is not something I'm although we're doing okay. In fact, they might get in the hits here. Actually, this is our big opportunity. There we go. So that's the boss, although it's a little bit of a process to use 2 summons. So there we go. We completed the critical battle, defeated an heir of Ember, or whatever it said. I wasn't quite paying attention. And helped our friend in Generic Fantasy Game 3. So that was that. That's probably about an hour, or hour and a half of video. So, oh my gosh, I just spawned in a terrible spot. So, is this the end of Zombie Shakespeare? Oh god, I fell. Yeah, I'm not encountering summon signs in my game. Oh, actually, what we'll do is this. We'll invade. We'll end with an invasion, where I will promptly get destroyed by enemies. But that should be fun. So we'll invade an enemy world as a dark spirit, and that will be the end of it, actually. So it'll... this should be a decent video. The PvP has been not quite as exciting as it could be, but that's just sort of how things are going to work. So I see our teammates here. Oh wow! It seems that the enemies of this area can actually harm me as well. Please, their Estus. I wanted to punish them a bit more if possible. So we'll heal. And go from there. Use some of that pine resin. Alright, so a decent kill against that enemy, but I don't know exactly where the host is. Perhaps they are back up here. And if so, they certainly have the advantage on me in terrain. Although my gut tells me that they might have moved downwards towards the city. A connection error occurred. Oh no. Not the most exciting bit of PvP in Generic Fantasy Game 3. Again, I don't know what's on the screen there. But, so I guess that will be the end of it. I've returned to my world. Look at those textures slowly load in. And that will be that. Actually, let's see if we can get one more backstab on this enemy. Hey, there we go. So we'll end with a backstab, or maybe 2. End with 2 backstabs. Why not? So that's that. Keep this video on the DL, and I hope you enjoyed. Bye.